All right, I want to pick up this poll out yesterday by News Corp papers that found 80% of Australians believe the Albanese government has failed to address their cost of living crises. Now, on top of that, more than half of all Australians now say the country's headed in the wrong direction, with Labor's renewables push deeply unpopular with those polled. Let's begin my panel for a closer look at this and a whole lot more. Sky News host James Morrow and Sky News Northern Territory correspondent Matt Cunningham. Well, Matt, I'll go to you first if I can. 74% of us say cost of living is a top priority for them, while just 4% say Indigenous affairs should be the government's focus. Now, we know last year the Voice was about all the PM was focused on. I think it cost him very much politically. He promised a reset. Where is it?
Well, I'm not convinced he needs a reset, Peter. I think he just needs to not bugger things up, because really a lot of the work has been done for him already when it comes to addressing cost of living issues. I think it's most likely we're going to get an interest rate cut somewhere in the middle of the year, and come July 1 we should also have stage 3 tax cuts come into play. Now, I think most Australians, the Australians who are really hurting at the moment are middle income Australians, people who have a mortgage, people who've seen their interest rates go up significantly, and people who've been affected badly by bracket creep over the past few years. So those two things can be addressed, and the Prime Minister really doesn't have to do anything except keep his caucus in check to make sure that happens. Those numbers are interesting. I think when it comes to those energy issues, I think that's going to be a real issue for the government between now and the next election, because people are going to be asking that question. They're going to be saying, you know, where was that $275 saving that you promised me? That's not what I'm seeing when I get my electricity bill. Instead, I'm seeing a 20, 30, 40% increase. So I think that's going to be a massive issue this year and into the next election. I think it's interesting that 74% of people see cost of living as the biggest issue. That's no surprise. 4% say it's Indigenous affairs. But I do think the government still needs to do something when it comes to Indigenous affairs. I've just spent a week in Alice Springs, Peter. I can tell you things are as bad there as they've ever been. I know we don't have a referendum on the cards this year, but we do need to have a plan to address things that are going badly wrong in the Northern Territory at the moment.
Yeah, look, I watch your coverage and I agree with you. I think it looks like it did when we were up there this time last year. But I think he can't wash his hands. OK, he lost the Voice, but that doesn't mean he sits there and does nothing. I think that's where he comes under pressure. But you're very kind. This is a first-term government. We expect them to do more than just not stuff up. I mean, James, he came back, you know, saying just after New Year's Eve, basically, that he's going to have this reset, he's on top of his game. But then he headed off to the cricket. I suspect he'll be at the tennis the next fortnight. We need him behind his desk, don't we?
Well, I mean, what's he going to be doing while he's behind the desk? I mean, you can always make things worse by being active. The thing, though, is I think, you know, the point here is that there's some real albatrosses around his neck here, one of them being, of course, this whole energy issue. And the problem is because, you know, they've painted themselves so into this corner politically, absolutely adamantly saying we're going hard on renewables, adamantly saying we will not do anything with nuclear, adamantly saying, you know, this is going to happen, it's going to push through whether you like it or not. Well, I mean, over the break, I talked to a lot of people in country Australia, in the bush, and farmers and so on, furious about, you know, the AEMO and their plans to run transmission lines through their properties. This is really bleeding him support beyond just in, you know, middle-class suburbs where people are hurting with their power prices. I just think, Peta, he has to really do something dramatic. A reset means a reset, and that means saying, hey, we're actually going to change the way we're approaching this. We've got a poll in tomorrow's Daily Telegraph about people's attitudes to nuclear power, including in Chris Bowen's own electorate, which I think will make some very sobering reading for the government.
James, just before we go, you and I caught up serendipitously in Horsham in Western Victoria, and we were both remarking how many farmers were saying to us that they were furious about the Bureau of Meteorology reporting going into that Christmas period that there would be horrific drought, there wouldn't be stock feed around, so they basically fire sold or shot in the paddock a lot of their stock. And of course, we've had a pretty wet summer down south. They didn't need to sell them, but they panicked.
Well, you know, but they were told, you go back and, you know, there's receipts on this. You go back and hear what the BOM, and I tell you what, the ABC did a really good job, too, amplifying this. This idea that it was going to be a horror summer of bushfire and drought. I talked to farmers in Victoria, in South Australia, who sold off stock, and now they say, well, you know what, we're not relying on the BOM anymore. We're going to private forecasting services. But all of these guys, they lost all their stock, and now they're going to have to restock. That's going to hit the cost of beef and lamb later on this year, too. Mark my words.
All right, Penny Wong, if I could go to that, please, Matt Cunningham. She's headed off today to the Middle East. Quite a fight today about what's in her official program. Jewish Australians angry that she's not going down to visit the sites of the Hamas attacks in the southern area of Israel. Mostly every other world leader has gone down there. And I think it matters, not because, you know, politicians have to tick a box and go everywhere, but there is this narrative being put out by the pro-Palestinian lobby that, in fact, this actually never happened, that somehow the Israelis are making it all up. So I think her going there sends that message that Australia believes Israel. What do you make of the fight today?
Well, I think she'd probably be wise to reconsider that itinerary and make that trip. It's interesting what you say, this misinformation that's being put out there. I mean, it's conspiracy theory stuff, trying to say that this didn't happen. And I think it's spread even beyond just the pro-Palestinian lobby. I mean, I was bailed up a couple of weeks ago by a woman at the footy who, you know, recognised me and then wanted to tell me that this was all being made up and, you know, how could we possibly be reporting that, you know, these people had been massacred and these hostages had been taken. This is the world we live in today, you know, strangely enough. It's a difficult one for the Foreign Minister. It's a difficult one for all Labor politicians, all Labor ministers, because they're trying to walk between, you know, walk both sides, if you know what I mean, because they have people within their own party, you know, who are very pro-Palestine, you know, and who would not want Penny Wong to be going there and to be sort of siding with Israel in any way. So you can understand, you know, the difficult line that she's trying to tread, but I think she would be wise to make that visit to southern Israel.
James?
Well, yeah, Peta, look, I think that this goes to not just about this particular issue. I think it is important that she go and see what happened in Sderot and places like that. I mean, that's, you know, just to validate that experience, as Matt suggests. But beyond that, this is just another indication of how reactive this government is. You know, they never wind up getting ahead of these events. They always wind up behind them. Remember when Rishi Sunak spoke at a synagogue in a temple in London soon after the attacks of October 7th? You know, Albanese was still up in Alice or at Uluru waiting around for Pat Farmer to finish his walk for the Voice and had to be kind of dragged kicking and screaming to speak to the Jewish community in Melbourne. This is a pattern with this government. They're reactive and they're slow to act, and it's hurting them again on this really, really crucial issue.
Hey, just the Victorian seat of Dunkley, we've got a by-election there following the sad death of the Labor incumbent MP, Peter Murphy. The Libs yesterday, this is the seat of Frankston and Langwarrin. It's in the southern parts of Melbourne, close to the Mornington Peninsula. The Libs yesterday pre-selected 31-year-old Mayor, Frankston Mayor Nathan Conroy. He'll go head-to-head with the Labor candidate, Jodie Balliet. What do you think here? It's a 6.3% seat, Labor seat. Some would say pretty safe Labor seat there, Matt Cunningham. But let's not forget the Liberal Bruce Bilson. He held the seat for 2 decades. Are we going to see a bit of a fight?
He was very popular too, wasn't he, Bruce Bilson? I actually lived in that seat for a while Bruce Bilson was the local MP. And I think that, you know, I think it could be. I think this could be a real fight. I mean, I don't know much about him, the mayor, but he looks like an up-and-comer. I think Labor would be a little bit worried. It's certainly not going to be a rerun of the Ashton by-election. I think that this is going to be a closely run thing. And if the coalition does manage to pick up this seat, then I tell you what, it's game on ahead of the election next year.
Yeah, I was reminding my producers, because I'm so much older than them today, that in 2001 we had an election there, a by-election in the seat of Aston, where the incumbent Peter Nugent died in office, which is similar to as happened now. And you usually expect a swing against the government of the day. In that case, it was the Howard government. In this case, it's obviously Prime Minister Albanese. But when you've got an MP that dies in office, I think it's a particularly different set of circumstances. We haven't got a date yet there from the Speaker. When we do, I'll let you know. We'll watch that one closely. Just quickly, James, election season's kicked off officially in the US. This is the Iowa caucuses. Now, I want you to explain to my viewers how a caucus is a bit different from a primary, and how do you think it's going to play out?
Well, look, really quickly, Peta, it's crazy in Iowa right now because there's a freezing cold Arctic blast, a one-in-a-decade blizzard happening right now. So that's really completely thrown everybody's campaigns in disarray. The way this caucus works, though, is you have to physically show up at a caucus site, like a church basement or a school gym or something like that, and then listen to all the different candidates, representatives, give a presentation, and then at the end of that, you go and you vote, and they decide how many people get this vote and how many votes go to this candidate. So it's a really interesting bit of very American democracy. Now, Donald Trump is on about 48 to 52%. He's going to win it. But everybody's looking at that number 2 because Iowa doesn't necessarily declare who the nominee is going to be, but it weeds out losers. Everybody's looking at Nikki Haley right now. She's the only one who's been rising in the polls, but it could also be, all over for Ron DeSantis if he can't wind up getting above that 18 to 20% mark that he's been polling at as well.
Gents, I'll leave it there. James and Matt, thank you for your company.